You're listening to the Youth for Life podcast with Michelle Bauman, Director of Y for Life at Lutherans for Life, where we prepare youth to be gospel-motivated voices for life. Be sure to stick around after today's live recording of our Chats for Life program to find out how you can be live too on our next Youth for Life podcast. What we want to do next is we want to move into abortion and talk about how abortion happens. Again, you guys are high school, college students. The information I'm sharing with you is information on the web. And so if it gets too hard, please let me know. But I think you should know the facts. And we want to make sure that you are prepared with those facts. Not that you want to harass women who are pregnant and considering it, but so that you know the severity of the situation. It is life and death, and also very harmful to the woman. So there are really two types of abortions. One is a chemical abortion and one is a medical abortion. Okay, and chemical abortions, they use two types of medication, and I'm mispronouncing this, so I will do the best I can, but mifepristone and then misoprostol is, I believe, how you say that, or misoprostol. But basically, one of them you take a few hours, you take a couple of days beforehand, and then you follow it up with the second medication. And when the second medication is taken, then 48 hours later, the baby should already be dead. So what the first medication does is it basically tells the uterus to disconnect or detach the baby from the wall of the uterus, which causes blood to stop flowing to the baby and puts the baby in cardiac arrest. And so then the mother, whenever that happens, then carries a dead baby inside of her and then takes the second medication in order to induce labor. So this is done at home. It is not done under the supervision of a doctor. In many cases, you need to have a prescription in order to get those medications. However, very recently, within the last year, those medications have been able to be purchased online from other countries. Now, of course, you never know what you're getting when you get it from other countries, but it's a risk that some girls are taking. Some definite issues with this. You're going to have severe cramping and a heavy period. It's caused hemorrhaging. It's caused infections because parts of the baby remain inside the mother. There's no one to check to make sure that everything is gone. And of course, ectopic pregnancies and other high-risk pregnancies, a girl is not going to know if she has one of those. And so this can even cause death. All right, not only for the child, which is very certain, it's very rare that it doesn't work, but it also can cause death for the mom. So the first type was chemical, right? The second type then is medical. And basically there are classically a number of approaches, but there are three basic approaches that are used now. So the first approach is in the first trimester, and that is a vacuum aspiration. And Sarah's not here this week. I'm kind of surprised she's not, but she did suggest liveaction.org, and I would suggest that you go to liveaction.org too. They do have some pretty good videos that explain this process or show you what's actually happening. They're animated, so you're not seeing real fetuses, babies, thankfully. But first trimester, a vacuum aspiration happens like this. A woman goes in to an abortion clinic, asks to have an abortion, and sets up an appointment to do so. The abortion the cost of the abortion is determined by the size of the baby. So there's that impetus to get rid of it quickly is very, very powerful, right? So some women will make the appointment to come the very next day, if that's possible, in order to save money, which works to Planned Parenthood's advantage because it doesn't give the woman, the mother, an opportunity then to actually think about what would be happening and maybe go to a pregnancy clinic. So if you know of someone who has gone, the impetus is real, right? The time is short, and they can only do this abortion during the first trimester. A lot of women don't find out that they're pregnant until they've been pregnant for a number of weeks, maybe 6 or 8. And so you only have 4 weeks until your first trimester is done. So what happens is a woman is then sedated, and the cervix is widened manually. They use a tool to widen the cervix so that a suction tube can be inserted into the womb. How many of you saw unplanned? Okay, you saw a picture or a representation of a vacuum aspiration then. Okay, and what it does is it is inserted, it sucks then the baby through the hose. It's usually small enough that it can come through. And then what the doctor does is it uses what's called a curette, which is a spoon with a sharp edge. And he places that in the uterus to scrape out what remains. Of course, the dangers of this, perforation of the uterus, in other words, a hole in the uterus or a tear in the uterus, or scarring in the uterus. And of course, perforation of the uterus is going to require surgery. Damage to the cervix, because again, that's being manipulated. It's not a natural occurrence. And if the cervix is damaged enough, then a woman will not be able to hold a baby to full term, not be able to carry a baby to full term. Sometimes she will not be able to carry a baby at all. In addition, the scars create areas of the uterus where a baby cannot implant in the future. Infections can occur and blood clots can occur. All right. In addition, of course, to the loss of a life, which is the child. In the second trimester, what they do usually is called a dilation and excavation. 24 hours before the abortion, a woman goes into an abortion clinic. She asks to have an abortion, and a synthetic dilator is inserted into her vagina and cervix. Basically, it's made out of seaweed, and it expands as it draws in water so that the cervix can already start dilating and make the abortion easier. At this point, the baby is too large to be sucked out, okay? And a shot then at that time, at that first appointment, is given into the womb and inserted into the baby. There's a high dose of medication that will cause the baby to die of a heart attack if it is inserted properly. She comes back then usually 2 days later, and then things are removed, okay? So what happens is they do some suctioning. The mother's given some anesthesia. They do some suctioning. They use what's called a Sofer clamp, which looks like tongs that have very sharp edges, okay? So they have teeth on the inside, and they are very long tongs. And during the abortion, the doctor sticks those tongs into the woman and grabs a piece of the baby and pulls parts out. Okay, so if the baby has not died, obviously the baby can feel that, and sometimes the baby is not given a shot. And so that is, again, we would define that as torture. Babies can feel pain. We know that the heart starts beating already by day 18, and that's long before a woman knows she is pregnant. But there is much evidence because the neurological system is already developed by the end of the first trimester that babies can feel pain. So the Sofer clamp then is used to tear apart the baby and then crush the baby's head, and then those parts are taken out. After that, again, a curette is used to scrape out the womb, and a final suction occurs. Antibiotic is usually given to the woman then to prevent infection. But of course, there are lots of dangers. Again, perforation of the uterus, damage to the cervix, scarring, damage to other internal organs as well. The bladder, the bowel, those sorts of things can be damaged as well because the woman has some deadening in that area. She may not even know that it's happening or feel that it's happening, but then later something is punctured and she has to go back into surgery. Future pregnancies are also usually affected. The likelihood of preterm labor then skyrockets, and I'll share some facts with you in just a moment. And in some cases, women will never become pregnant after this. In some cases, women will be sterile after one abortion. In the third trimester, this is called a labor induction abortion. So basically, the woman will go through all the stages of labor. It takes 3 to 4 days to complete, accomplished in a variety of ways, but they always use medication to start this. Again, they insert the needle to kill the fetus, and then she carries the fetus around for 2 to 3 days If it's not dead, when she goes back in for an ultrasound, they will give the fetus, again, the shot. She's then, in the meantime, sent back home or sent to a hotel. So what she'll do is she'll come back and then she'll get drugs to start the delivery process. So some of you, when you have babies in the future, they may give you medication to speed up the delivery process for your sake or for the sake of the baby, for the safety of them. Those are the same drugs that are then given to the woman. So she begins labor. See, abortions usually, again, will occur in a way that at this point will be very painful. Sometimes the labor comes very quickly and the woman is then forced to deliver at home or in a hotel. Very often if this happens, they will suggest that she sit on a toilet and then the abortionist will come to the hotel and clean up afterwards. This is also usually the time when partial birth abortions occur. Maybe you've heard of that. How many of you have heard of partial birth abortions? It's now legal in some of your states. Illinois is one of them. You can abort up to the day of delivery. Partial birth abortion is done when an abortionist, and the mother agrees, wants to use the fetal parts, the organs, for research or for other things, okay? And so what happens is they have to deliver that baby live. So they don't stick the needle in. The baby is delivered feet first rather than head first, and once it gets to its head, the abortionist stops the delivery and takes scissors and jams them into the back of the head between the skull and the neck, and then opens those scissors to ensure death. But then he pulls the baby out and they can immediately harvest the organs for whatever it is that they need, which again, very, very tragic. Dangers to this, to the mother. Of course, when the mother is getting a shot, there's always the danger that that shot could miss and could get her. And they've had cases of this where she's received a high dose of drugs that will stop the heart. Lacerations, tears, hemorrhaging, dangers that are present in normal delivery. And additionally, and on top of that, then she's going to have a very difficult recovery and likely suffer from hormonal imbalances, and depression rates are very, very high. Abortions during the second and third trimester, especially those two trimesters, especially the third, it greatly increases the chance for breast cancer. There is a group of pro-life OBGYNs. The acronym is APLOG, AAPLOG. If you go there at aplog.org, they have a lot of research on the connection between abortion and preterm labor, abortion and preterm births, abortion and breast cancer. Okay, and those are facts that we aren't sharing, that aren't being shared, information that's not being shared with women when they enter an abortion clinic, like Planned Parenthood. Okay, so I want to pause here and see if there are any questions. Do you have any questions on this issue or this part of it?
I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to say most of the time they refer to those three last things that you're talking about as surgical abortion. A lot of times people will call the chemical abortion a medical abortion. They'll use that for medical, not the three surgical ones. But okay. I was at a workshop last week and they were telling us just not to use the word medical abortion, just say either like chemical for the first part or medical, or not medical, or surgical, because medical makes it seem like it's like a medical procedure that's like medically necessary. So they told us not to do that. And then they're also talking about how there's a abortion pill reversal pill. It's just normal Promethean. It's not like some weird thing that they invented that's like magic, because that's kind of like what the abortion industry is trying to switch it to. They're trying to say, oh, it's like not tested and not proven, not safe. But Promethean, they literally use for like decades. They've been using it on women that are just frequently miscarrying, because like you need progesterone whenever you're growing the child to like prevent uterine contractions and keep the cervix closed. So they've literally been using it for women to not have miscarriages for so long. And now they've started using it after the first pill of mifepristone has been taken. and it's like literally saved hundreds of babies already. Like, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't work every time, but it works enough of the time. There's been hundreds of babies that have grown and have been born normal like everyone else. So
yep. And we're actually going to provide a resource for you on that next week when we talk about how you respond to someone who is thinking about an abortion, but also then how do you care for mothers after an abortion? Because, of course, you guys you will run into people who have had abortions in your life. Studies show that 1 in 4 women in America will have an abortion by age 40 or in her 40s, the end of her 40s. I mean, that's a very, very, the likelihood of you meeting someone is very high. In addition, the age group that is most likely to have abortions are in their 20s. And that's college students, that's your age group, right? And so the likelihood of you encountering someone who's considering it is, even at a Concordia, is very high. Now, I have 2 other things to talk to you about tonight, but I want to be cognizant of time, and I want to make sure that you are okay with moving on. I have a kind of a basic fact sheet about who gets abortions and who gets aborted, and then I have some phrases that are commonly used in the abortion argument and kind of want to talk through with you some ways that you can respond to those phrases. So I just need a general show of hands. If you're willing to continue the discussion tonight, please raise your hand. And the other option is, no, let's postpone this discussion. So I, again, want to be cognizant of time and not take advantage of that. So how many of you are good to go? Keep on discussing? Okay. For the most part, can you hold them up again? Me, if you think that it's getting too long, and we'll stop and we will either add an additional day for abortion or try and include it next week. So let me give you some facts about who. Yeah.
Mrs. Bauman, I have a question before we move on real quick.
Sure, yeah.
So with the last type of abortion, like the surgical one for the partial birth where they use the scissors, like if the doctor doesn't want to do that and the woman decides to do that like really soon, like maybe a couple of days before she goes into labor, could the doctor say no to like doing the abortion?
So in most laws actually do not require doctors or nurses to assist in abortions. Now, some of those laws are changing, and so as future healthcare people, I know there's a few of you on here that are thinking about that. You're definitely going to want to know what the laws are, not only for your state, but also what the expectations are for your hospital. I would encourage you, as you're interviewing, to make sure that you say, if I get this position, I will not participate in these activities. You have the right to do so. Now, they may not hire you because of it. Again, still, in most states, there are laws that would protect a doctor from having to participate in that. Yeah, good question.
Another quick question, sorry. But so like kind of off of her question. So what if there was do you have to sign a contract as a woman, saying that you want this because I don't know, if you were in the delivery room and I'm sure your hormones of course are crazy through the pregnancy and things like that. And you decide you want to keep the baby just instantaneously, are they able to do that? Or is it
well, again, it's going to depend on the procedure. Obviously if you've already received the shot, that's very difficult. But like Hallie mentioned, the shot, you wouldn't be able to reverse that. But the medicines you would be able to reverse. And that's one of the tragedies of abortions. One of the tragedies really is that you don't have a chance to go back and make a different decision, right? Women who carry their babies to full term, but are considering giving them up for adoption, still have a choice to keep them, right? And those who deliver, you still have the choice to put a child up for adoption if that is what you choose. But an abortion ends a life permanently, and it harms additional lives, just the mother, to name one, but we haven't even mentioned the father or extended family members that are then dealing with it. So I think, Libby, once you've already entered into that process, it would be very, very difficult to change. There are stories, and you can see them on liveaction.org and other pro-life websites of women who are on that table and decide not to. And they come out talking about how they were forced to do it, how they pleaded that that would not be the case, or pleaded that it would not happen, and the procedure continued. So again, yeah, Pastor?
I will say that there are some children who do survive surgical abortions, and their stories are out there as well. In my second parish in Wichita, one of the children who was severely autistic was adopted through the foster care by a family, and he was a survivor of a medical abortion. And it's, I believe, the basis also of some of the Born Alive type movies and the things that we've been hearing about, where people have tried an abortion and the child is still born alive, and then they just, in a sense, do the infanticide, leave it, abandon it to the elements to die, and then dispose of the body.
Yeah, if you would like names of or links for that, I can certainly give you a few of them. There's even some very good books. So, people who have survived abortions and live to tell the story. What I'm going to do when I send you your email tonight is I'm going to send you an image of a reproductive rights map. You can see then on that map how many people or which countries actually allow abortions and which countries don't. In general, it is calculated that the total number of abortions each year is approximately 56 million. In the United States, those numbers are going down, but that is not the case worldwide. However, it is very, very interesting that the countries that have allowed for abortion to happen just without a medical reason, in recent years, within the last decade, those numbers have gone down greatly. And I really do believe that, women are starting to see, and society is starting to see, that on-demand abortion isn't a good thing. Okay, but you'll be able to see that on the map. The total number of abortions in the U.S., there are a number of different numbers out there, but the one that most will confirm is that it's over 61 million. In 2017, there are 61,628,584. Okay, but at the same time, 61 million, that's a lot. And so what I'm also going to do is I'm going to send you a link to a video, or at least mention it to you right now so you look it up. It's called The Sound of Abortion. It's on YouTube. And what you will hear, it doesn't sound like what the title is. What you will hear are babies that are dropped. And for every 10,000 lives, you'll hear a baby dropped. And you will get a chance to compare all the number of abortions to all of these wars that Americans have fought in. Okay, it's very powerful. Please, if you have a chance, look it up. How many of you have heard it already before? How many of you have seen it already? If I came to your school and presented, you definitely have seen it. In the United States, you should know, again, 1 in 4 women have an abortion by the time they're in their 40s. 59% of abortions are performed on women who have had at least one previous birth. But 60% of of all abortions were performed on women in their 20s. Again, that age group is the highest number of abortions. Why do you think that is?
They're not married and they don't want responsibility.
Yep. Not married, don't want responsibility. They're just starting out in life. They're starting a job, or maybe they're finishing their education, right? Any other reasons?
They probably just don't have the finances. And I know Planned Parenthoods will particularly target colleges. I think it's 79% of Planned Parenthoods are within a 5-mile radius of college campuses.
Yep, so it's the fact you should know. And Pastor Duncan mentioned that a lot of them will be planted in poorer neighborhoods. Well, Planned Parenthood says on their own site, which is guttmacher.org, G-U-T-T, and I'll send this to you, M-A-C-H-E-R, guttmacher.org, that is the site that includes all of their research. They will say, no, 6 out of 10 of our planned pregnancy facilities are actually in middle income places, right? But think about this, guys. They claim that only 4 are in areas of minorities. But again, minorities are minority. And so to have 4 out of every 10 placed in an area of minorities is a very significant number in general. Okay. You should know 49% of abortions were performed on women below the poverty level. Again, that's a prime place for them to have abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood clinics. And again, college students don't have a lot of money, right? And that's one of the techniques they use. You won't be able to take care of this child. It will be too hard financially. 46% of abortions were performed on women who had never married. It is also very interesting that cohabitating women, that means women who are living with men but not married to them, 31% of abortions are for women who are cohabitating. Okay, if there's ever an argument against cohabitation, this is one of them. It proves very clearly, the abortion numbers, that cohabitation does not create stability for a couple. 14% of abortions were performed on married women, and most of those women were older. And that's kind of a sad commentary. Most of the reasons they gave were, I have too many children, we can't afford them. Okay. What about race? So abortion rates for African Americans are 5 times that of white women. Despite their low population numbers, they make up 28% of all abortions in 2014, whereas white American women were 39%. But again, African American that is born is 5 times more likely to have an abortion. In addition, just in the state of New York, an African American that is conceived in New York is more likely to be aborted than to be born. There were more abortions of African Americans in New York in 2015 than there were births. Again, this is a crisis, and you know now the history of Planned Parenthood. It should be no surprise to us that minorities are convinced on a regular basis that this is a good option. I have a list of top reasons. You guys have kind of mentioned some of them, but I'll send that to you. Cohabitation. Again, I mentioned that. I have a fact that I'll send to you. Planned Parenthood is reporting a lot of information, but there are some things Planned Parenthood doesn't report. It doesn't report cases of sexual abuse, physical abuse, sex trafficking, sex selective abortions. In other words, aborting someone because the baby is female. It doesn't report financial incentives that abortion clinics receive or the number of abortions they do. You'll want to see liveaction.org for that or other pro-life sites. What about disabilities? Well, in 2014, 4% of all pregnancies ended in America during the second trimester, because that's usually when they do an amniocentesis test, so they can pull some of the fluid that's in the womb and then make a estimate as to whether or not that baby has a disability. Okay, and they test for all these different disabilities. Well, in 2014, 4% of all abortions in the second trimester were those where the baby supposedly had a disability. Some people get that test and they choose to have the baby anyway, and the rates of the baby not being born with a disability are very high. And some people have babies that are born with disabilities and they love them. They love them and they care for them, and they find that children born with disabilities bring them great joy. And I'm going to stop there because I know Mona is going to tell you a lot more about that. But I have one more fact, and that is that in the U.S. alone, the estimate is that we are missing 30% of the Down syndrome population. Again, travesty. Okay, and you probably have heard in the news about how other countries are eliminating. It's rejoiced that they're eliminating Down syndrome in their country. What that means is they're aborting babies with Down syndrome. Now, just so you know, for those of you that plan to have children, and I hope you all plan to have children, you can refuse that amniocentesis test. You can do it in order to prepare. Some Christians will have that test in order to prepare, so that they know ahead of time if there's a child with a disability. But some parents say no to the test because it doesn't matter. Our family, we said no both times. The truth is, because we are all born sinful, we all have things that are wrong with our body genetically, right? There is no perfect human. And so we go into pregnancies with that idea that a child, no matter what, is a blessing. Okay? That's the end of my facts questions. Again, I'll send you the sheet so you can look over it. I'm seeing some despondent faces, like, are you despondent because this is like overwhelming and very sad, and of course we do have a lot of hope. You guys have a message that you can share that is so hopeful, and that in that every child is a blessing. And whether that child is wanted by the mother or not, someone wants that child. There are so many people, hundreds of thousands of people who are waiting to adopt children. And so if we can impress upon women who need to be told it's okay to carry a baby full term and not have an abortion, but to put a baby up for adoption, there is so much hope in that, right? And so much promise. So let's talk about abortion myths, or phrases that you might hear. Okay, and what I want you to do is I want you to unmute yourself, and I want you to jump in with ideas. Last week, you said that you wanted not just biblical arguments, but also that you wanted logical arguments. And so what I've tried to do is create a sheet that I'll send to you with some logical arguments as well as biblical arguments, because as gospel-centered people, it would behoove us to share that message as well, right? But I want you to think about how you would respond. So let's talk about this first phrase. And again, these are phrases that probably a woman that's pregnant is not going to say, but these would be phrases in the marketplace, in the classroom, in the place of work. Okay? So first, stay out of my uterus. Men shouldn't have a right to tell me what to do with my body. How many of you have heard something like that? Yeah, okay. So how do we respond logically to that? Jesse?
There are two separate bodies.
Good. Scientifically, there are two separate bodies. Good. What else?
I would say that gender, that's being sexist, saying that in the first place. If something is moral, both genders should agree on it in the first place.
Good. The sexist thing would be very appealing, right? It's a faux pas right now. What else? Is it logical to say that a man shouldn't have any opinion about this? It's not. It's not logical. Because first of all, men are involved in the creation of a baby, right? But here's another thing. Let me ask you, how many of you have opinions about child abuse? How many of you think child abuse is wrong? And how many of you were abused as children? Okay, maybe you don't want to raise your hands for that. But we don't do that in any other area. We don't say to people, you can't have an opinion on this. You can't say that's wrong unless you've experienced it, right? Okay, so again, there's just some lack of logic there. As Christians, of course, how would we respond as Christians? Your body is not what?
Yours and yours alone.
That's right. It is owned by God. It was bought by Jesus, by his blood, right? The Holy Spirit resides in it, and your body was made to be of service to others. Now, again, this is not the approach I would take with a woman who is thinking about an abortion. Okay, this is the approach I would take in a logical argument, because when you are talking to a woman who's thinking about abortion, what she needs most is love and support, not arguments. Okay, any questions about that? How about the phrase, abortion shouldn't be an election issue? What do you guys think, logically?
Whether or not you think it shouldn't be, it is. So you have to vote one way or the other.
Okay, what else?
If you truly believe that it's a moral issue, then it's something that you should stand up for in the political sphere and make a change.
Good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But also it is a huge deal because it is our population on the line. Not only are we, God's creation, but it's also the future population of our country as well.
Okay. And a person who is not religious, that might be a good appeal for that individual, right? We're talking about the health of our country. And here's a fact, okay? Countries, cultures, governments that cease to value the least of these, guess what happens historically? Historically, when cultures or governments, when people start to devalue marriage, family, and children, it doesn't take long for that culture to fall apart. Okay, you see this in the fall of Rome. You see this in the fall of other great cultures. Okay, so that's a logical argument.
You could just also say everyone has different opinions, so of course people are going to agree. So of course it's going to be an election issue just because it is such a big deal.
Absolutely. The other thing that you might talk about, and because one of the things that's often thrown out here is that it's just a single issue, right? You shouldn't base your vote on this single issue. But the truth is, abortion is not a single issue. It is related to racism. It is related to human rights. It is related to sexism. It is related to materialism, to genocide, to poverty, to healthcare. It is related to misinformation or the lack of information, to the profiteering of baby parts. It is a multi-issue issue, right?
I also think that if you truly are convicted that abortion is murder, then in the same way that you would think that laws against murder are important and that they should be voted in and remain laws, you should vote for abortion to be illegal.
Absolutely. Okay, so from a Christian perspective, what would you say? We're called to obey our government, right? But we're also privileged to be lights to the world, right? We don't want to make it mandatory. We don't want to make our religion mandatory, but we also do want to take care of our neighbor. It's part of our vocation, right? As Christians, we have a vocation that extends beyond our family, and that is in our community and world, to do what is best for our neighbor. And you've seen through the facts, it's not best for children, and it's not best for the mother, and it's not best for our community. When we begin to devalue life at the beginning, it's very easy to devalue people with disabilities. It's very easy to devalue people at the end of life. It's very easy to devalue humans in general. Right? Okay, what about the phrase, Christians want to force their patriarchal, oppressive opinions on us? Just Christians forcing us to do what they want us to do. So how do you combat that logically? Hallie?
I would say it's not all Christians who are pro-life. I mean, I love Jesus and I agree with the Bible, but honestly, my stance isn't hardly even biblical. I always talk about the science and the facts and the philosophy behind it when I'm talking to people. If I'm in a debate, I never really bring God into it or the Bible into it. And, I have atheist friends that are pro-life, and you go to, the march, and there's so many people that aren't Christian.
True.
So, I would say.
The interesting thing about that statement was that there were a lot of, adjectives in there that were rooted in opinions.
Oh, yeah.
So that statement could almost be, it wouldn't be a viable claim in an argument because there was no claim in there. So
because it's an opinion.
You could make the case that in and of itself is an invalid argument. Okay. Due to the fact that it doesn't make a case at all.
How do you address, I agree with you. How do you address the term oppressive? It comes up very often with Christianity, against Christianity, right? It's just another oppressive. How do you do that?
I think sort of just asking them to justify themselves, just asking, okay, what do you mean? Because when Christians talk about pro-life issues, generally they're not really talking about restricting. I mean, it's more of a love concern focus, not the rhetoric is not about oppression. So I guess just asking them to explain what they mean more.
Yeah, that's great. That's excellent. And can we give examples of the Bible of when that Jesus is not oppressive to women? Do we see Jesus reaching out and upholding women ever? What about the woman at the well? Jesus could have thrown the first stone. In fact, the woman at the well should have been stoned because of the law, right? But what does Jesus do instead?
He quenches her thirst spiritually and gives her salvation, essentially. And he doesn't get her circumstances. He shows grace to her. And also just going off what Bonnie was saying, a counter to the oppressive thing, is that majority of charities are started by Christians, and also pregnancy resource centers are the least oppressive place for a woman to go. They take no matter what. So that's not an oppressive place for a woman to go. In fact, Planned Parenthood is oppressive.
Yeah. You guys have come up with so many arguments. One of the others that I would use is Jesus embraces children. He says, let the little children come to me. So he is neither oppressive to women nor oppressive to children. And Pastor mentioned that and during Roman times, abortion came to be. Do you know how that happened? Because before then, with infanticide, people would take their babies out to the hills, right? But there are historical records of Christians going out into the hills and bringing those babies back. We know that this was occurring even from famous works of literature. Oedipus Rex, right? Ancient Greece. But Christians actually were known, and non-Christian authors would write about this, they were known for saving those babies that were out in the hills. Okay? Christians have always upheld life. Here's your next one. I only have 2 more. Actually, no, I lied. I have 4 more, but we can stop after 2 more. 1, a fetus isn't a person, it's just a blob. This one's an easy one, right? What do you say logically? Christian?
Where do you draw the line?
Okay. Where do you draw the line for a fetus becoming a human being?
Like what magical event suddenly makes it a human being if it's not conception?
Okay. All right. What else?
I was just going to say, if you look at any like biological or science textbook, it literally says like fertilization is when human life begins. Like 95% of embryologists agree with that. Like it's literally, I mean, your body can make new DNA, but whenever the 2 like gametes fuse, it's a totally new set of DNA that has like both the mother and the father's DNA. So that's a different person.
Yep. And the law of biogenesis says you cannot bring 2 humans together and they cannot produce a cat, right? Mm-hmm. When you have 2 of a kind, you bring them together, what they produce is another one of those kinds, right?
This is something that Kristen Hawkins, like the president of Students for Life, says, and she says if you're driving on the road and it's dark and you see something ahead that sort of looks like a human, you're not going to speed up. So even if you're not sure if it's a human life, biologists have countered that, but you're going to slow down and you're not going to speed up. So I think for people that aren't as scientifically advanced, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like that image. Okay, what about this one? I have the right to do what I want with my own body. I have the right. Logically speaking, how do you counter that?
So does the baby.
Okay, babies have rights too. Do we give more human rights to bigger people or more powerful people? No, right? So a baby has human rights too, right? What else?
Recently with the coronavirus, SFLA have been like really pushing the narrative of your rights can be like taken away from you if the rights of other people like matter, like if it can harm other people. So like we normally have the right to go outside and, well, like we can go outside, but like we normally have the right to congregate in groups of more than 10 or go to church or go to a restaurant out to eat. But when that could like hurt our country or hurt other people, then that right can be taken away from us. So it's just the same way, like you normally have the right to like your body, but when it like could affect another person inside of your body, then that right can be taken away for just 9 months.
And have we ever given individuals the right to kill another being?
Yeah, but it's not good when that happens.
Right. Only in self-defense, right? Legally. That's exactly right.
In very simple matters, we infringe upon your rights. You don't have the right to drive down every street 60 miles an hour.
That's right.
And go through every intersection any time you want.
Yeah. From a spiritual perspective, what commandment is this? I have the right to do what I want with my own body. What commandment issue is happening here?
Kind of just breaking the first, just saying basically
absolutely.
God.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Bonnie. It's the first commandment, saying, I am my own God. I can control my body. All right.
That's what Margaret Sanger's The Woman Rebel, no gods.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I have 2 more. Do you want to continue or are you good to go? And I can just send them. Show of hands, how many of you want to continue with 2 more? Okay. If you don't want to continue, that's okay. I will still have you, I have you down on my list and I will send out an email. Next week, we will cover abortion part 2 and we will just stick to 2 weeks because I know some of you are well versed in this and so I don't want to lose you. But next week we're going to talk about what do you do with women who are considering abortion, and then also how do you help a woman who's had an abortion. Okay? If those of you that want to leave want to, that's fine. I will go over the last 2 with you. So, and thanks for joining us. Here's your next phrase. I'm personally not for abortion, but it's legal and I don't want to force my beliefs on anyone. How do you respond to that?
I always say that neutrality helps the oppressor. And so if you are just saying something for yourself, like almost comparing it to the child abuse thing, like I'm personally against child abuse, but you can do what you want. That's not kind. And that's not what God says.
Right. And we would never say that, right? We would never say, well, it's okay if you want to abuse your child, but do a country's laws remain the same? If we base our morality on a country's laws, then are we making a wise decision? Is that a firm foundation? No. Can you give me an example of a law that has changed, that was once legal and we find appalling now?
Slavery.
Yes, good. Slavery. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. We can't base our morality and the decisions we make on our country's laws, right? What about as Christians? I'm personally not for abortion, but it's legal and I don't want to force my beliefs on anyone.
I feel like, well, if you're talking to fellow Christians, like that's actually a really common Christian.
It is.
I would say like pushing people who are Christian to think, okay, well, why are you personally against it? And do those reasons warrant wanting other people to be personally against it and thinking that it's more of a social issue than just a personal issue?
If it's wrong for you, why wouldn't it be wrong for you? If you think it's important to protect lives, why shouldn't we protect all lives? Can you think of any other response, Christian?
I'm reminded of the time when Paul said, "Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works." So someone who claims to be a Christian does not uphold the Christian values and the value of life, then how can they viably claim to be a Christian in the first place? Like if you're arguing with somebody who's a Christian and they make that case, then you can point out that no, they actually have a responsibility and a, I don't know, charter maybe to uphold the value of life.
Okay, yeah. One of our vocations is to what? To serve others, right? To uphold the lives of others. That's what we were designed for. And this is one of those areas where that's necessary. Okay, good. And my final one is abortion is healthcare. Logically, how do you fight that?
Healthcare doesn't end the life of someone.
Good. What else?
If you look at like the Hippocratic oath that doctors have to take, they're not supposed to do any harm, and like abortion harms people. So
significant risks, right? For the mother. Obviously it harms the child.
Looking at the ramifications, not only physically, but also mentally for women who undergo abortions, obviously shows that it can cause more issues than it could possibly solve.
Yeah.
Even taking into account the loss of a life.
So I mentioned earlier that I had some facts for you about women and cancer rates and those sorts of things. I'll just share a couple with you. A woman has an abortion between the ages of 18, well, under 18 and over 29 has just increased her risk of breast cancer by 100%. 100%. A woman who has a child and an abortion increases her risk of breast cancer by 50%. One of the best ways not to get breast cancer is to have a baby and to nurse a baby. Doctors have proven that. But even if you've done that once and you have an abortion, 50%, that's pretty amazing by age 45.
Do you know why that is? Like, I would think maybe cervical cancer or something. Why is it breast cancer?
Yeah, so breast cancer, and they do have some facts on cervical cancer too, but breast cancer because the lobules in the breast are at stage 1 and 2 during those early stages of pregnancy, even all the way up until basically birth. And those lobules are the lobules that will become cancerous if they don't transition into something else. And so when a woman goes full term, they will actually transition into milk producing or, have other hormonal helps. And so if a woman actually follows through and has the baby and goes through the whole process, then those same lobules that were possible cancers or cancer forming actually become cancer resistant and help a woman fight breast cancer. There's some really, really good information on AppLog about that. And I would encourage you to look it up. They do a really great job of explaining it. First trimester, not so much, again, because there's just not the influx of hormones as much as in the second and third trimester. But because those hormones come about, they are transitioning those cells. And if the hormones get cut off, the cells stay in a cancer-producing state. So that's a great question.
So you listed a bunch of percentages, and I noticed one of them was 100%.
Yeah.
That does not mean, what does that number mean?
It doesn't mean that 100% of women who have an abortion before 18 or after 29 will have breast cancer. It means that you are twice as likely, right? Okay, 100% more likely, or whatever you would have started with. Like, for example, if you have a background of breast cancer in your family, you are now 100% more likely, right?
So if you have a chance of maybe 3 in 100, your chances are now 6 in 100?
Well, the average woman has a chance of 1 in 8.
Okay.
Okay, so now you've just moved it up to a quarter, or which would be 2 of 8 or 3 of 8. However, again, depending on your family history. But that's a significant increase, right? And the more abortions you have, the more likely that is the case. It also increases your risk of preterm birth. Anyone who has 2 abortions or more increase their risk of preterm birth by 93%. That's huge. With a baby that you want to have, right? Preterm birth is very dangerous for a child. So what about abortion as healthcare? How do you address that from a Christian perspective? In every single case, abortion harms our neighbor, right?
The 5th commandment.
Yeah, 5th commandment, good.
Who does it heal? Right?
Right.
Like, how's the word health in it? Who does it provide health to?
Right. You're absolutely right. You guys have done a marvelous job. Awesome discussion. And you have like listened and taken in so much, and I will send you an email or maybe 2 with some big attachments or an invitation to see the presentation. So thanks for hanging on. I do want to show you real quick before you leave, for those of you who are still here, this book, highly recommend, kind of lays out a lot of arguments that are logical. There are some obviously faith-based arguments as well. This is another one that's really just logical, not faith-based. Pro-Life 101, written really for the Right to Life organizations by Scott Klusendorf. And I would encourage you, if you read it, to remember that you are a gospel-motivated individual, and so you want to incorporate those comments as well. But he gives you some very good logic-based arguments. Again, the first one was by Randy Alcorn, and it's Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Arguments. And this one is Pro-Life 101 by Scott Klusendorf. And if you need me to send those names, shoot me a text or an email or something. Any final questions or comments? I hope you are not leaving tonight's discussion feeling, well, as if you can do nothing, because there's so much that you can do, and there's so much hope and so many people who want, and you are them, right, that want to reach out and help others. Just because we have a history of abortion in America doesn't mean we have to have a history of abortion in America. But even if we do, as Christians, we have much hope to offer, much love to offer, much care to offer.
One of the greatest offerings we have as Christian is forgiveness.
Yes.
And redirection in life.
All right. Well, I will see you next week. Thanks so much for your brave, and strong educational pursuits. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us for today's life topic. Check out whyforlife.org or email Michelle at whyforlife.org to find out how and when you can go live with us at our next Chats for Life session. Or join us next time, right here at Why for Life Podcasts, where youth learn how to be gospel-motivated voices for life.